Hey everyone, and welcome back to Consoles Only. I just wanted to talk about something that I've been considering since last year, which was September 2020, about 6 months ago at this point. I was wondering, is Genshin Impact actually a better game overall than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? Now, I do have somewhat of an answer for you, at least from my perspective, but like most things in this world, it really depends on the person who's playing it, the nostalgia that person has for a certain series, and a whole host of other things like likes and dislikes, etc., etc. You really do have to understand that one man's trash can be another man's treasure, and what one person likes, another might not, vice versa, all that stuff. It doesn't mean you can't appreciate the stuff that you aren't into though, as I hopefully will show during this video. So as a lot of people know, Breath of the Wild came out in 2017 on the Nintendo Switch and was also, funnily enough, on the Wii U, but not a lot of people played it there as far as I'm aware. It was basically beloved from virtually day one, with 10 out of 10s from all over the place, all across the internet, an instant classic, so to speak. Now, I got Breath of the Wild on day one myself with my Nintendo Switch console. Genshin Impact, however, came out in September of 2020, and I also played that day one. Even before Genshin released, it was compared to Breath of the Wild in a negative way, and I heard a lot of people calling it things like a clone, or a copy, a knockoff, that sort of thing. Despite that though, it has been incredibly successful and is, again, beloved by many people. So, we have two very similar games that have both found huge success, both have millions of fans all around the world, so how can you really decide which game's better? Like I said earlier, that's all going to depend on the person, but in my opinion, my honest opinion, as someone who's played console games for over 25 years at this point, Genshin Impact is actually the better game for me. Let me stress that, for me. Now, before you rush to the comments and smash the dislike button into oblivion, let me just try and explain this to you and argue my case for why, for me personally, it's better. And also, I do just want to say again, just because I like Genshin better doesn't make it true. If you like Breath of the Wild better, then I'm happy for you, and I wish I could enjoy it the same way you do, but I just don't. That's just the long and short of it. So let me go back to the beginning. I played Breath of the Wild on day one for about 7 hours straight, I would say. I enjoyed the first 2 hours, but after that I was really starting to get bored. I found the whole game just incredibly dull. I didn't feel any reason to move forward. I didn't care about the characters or the story or anything going on. And I think the reason that I could never really get into it was because I was never really a Nintendo guy back in the day. You know, I'm in my early 30s now and I've been playing games 25 plus years. I have exactly zero nostalgia for Zelda games, or actually Mario games for that matter. The only Zelda game I ever played was Link's Awakening DX on the Game Boy Color, which I did like, but other than that, I had no interest in Ocarina or Majora's Mask or Wind Waker, despite most of my friends having them and saying, oh, these are brilliant, these are great. And of course I had an N64 and I had a GameCube, but I just didn't care about the games, so I didn't buy them. I never played them. But having said all that, I love a game that I think's a masterpiece, and I know for a fact that loads of people think it's massively overrated and dull, and that would be Shenmue. Even some of my closest friends really hate it and say that it's really bad, and you know, it's a person by person thing. I think some of my issues with Breath of the Wild come from the gameplay. I really don't like the weapon breaking system and the durability system that it uses at all. I'm just really not a fan of it. It's probably my main gripe with the game overall, actually. I'm kind of more of a stats person, you know, I like getting weapon drops of different rarities and upgrading them and keeping them and perhaps switching, you know, depending on what the situation calls for. And the game does kind of have that a little bit, but not enough for me, which kind of follows on to my next point as well. There's no real leveling up system and very little in the way of RPG mechanics. Of course, don't get me wrong, Breath of the Wild doesn't need to have those. It doesn't need loads of RPG mechanics. It's just things I like in games, you know. And I'm well aware that this game wasn't made to cater to me, you know, personally. But what it does, when games don't have the things in that I'm really interested in, it very quickly makes me lose interest. And yeah, it's just simple. There just isn't enough RPG mechanics in the game for my personal taste. Also, oh my god, the puzzle dungeons is something that I just cannot stand. I'm someone who loves combat, I love exploration, I love collecting things, but I really don't enjoy puzzles in pretty much any game, really. There's a few exceptions, but generally I just don't go for puzzles. It's actually the same reason I quit playing Immortals Phoenix Rising a little while ago. There's just too many damn puzzles, and they brought out a DLC that was basically more puzzles, and again, I just don't like it. I don't mind some light puzzles here and there, as I said, but it's just something I don't enjoy in general, so it was always going to put me off. Visually though, I think Breath of the Wild looks fine. I mean, it's not mind-blowing, it is on the Switch after all, which might hold it back a tiny bit, but it's fine enough, it looks good, it looks nice. It is kind of basic looking, I suppose, in some areas, but again, I suppose maybe basic's not the right word, because some stuff in Breath of the Wild actually looks really, really good, especially when you get the right light and it's really bright and colourful. It's great. The world can definitely have really nice vistas and environmental details, but overall, I think it's a little bit barren with not much to see or do, if I had to be somewhat brutally honest. While we're on the subject of plain and dull, I really find Link generic as a character, and I always have, and I get that he's iconic and all that, but he's just never been interesting to me personally, and again, I didn't grow up playing the Zelda games, so I have no real nostalgia for him, but now that I think about it, maybe he's kind of meant to be generic, considering, the game shares its name with Princess Zelda and not Link. He's supposed to be the surrogate, hero that we embody, sort of thing, so perhaps that's the reason. If so, then that's cool, but again, just not a character that I've been like, oh my god, Link, Either way, I'm just not really a fan. I think that sort of covers the reasons, or the main reasons at least, why I don't really like Breath of the Wild. I mean, the cooking stuff is fine, I suppose, the horse taming is perfectly fine, as well as some other smaller aspects. I guess they're all okay and they all serve their purpose. Like, the combat is actually relatively fun, it's just the weapon breaking that I don't like. And also, I would just like to point out, you might be wondering why there's no Breath of the Wild footage here at this point, or at any point in this video. The reason is that after I originally played it in 2017, for those 7 hours that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, I never ever loaded it up again. I just dropped it and stopped playing it. I just couldn't understand what all the fuss was about at the time, at all. Then, after that, I actually sold the game on eBay after about 4 days of consideration, and I've never looked back or felt interested enough to try it again, quite honestly, which probably sounds like an absolute sin to some of you watching this, but it's just how I felt and frankly still feel now. I suppose now I really should explain why I prefer Genshin Impact so much, and why I personally like it a lot better than Breath of the Wild. Firstly, Genshin just oozes personality to me, far more than Breath of the Wild does. I love the look of every character and how incredibly detailed they all are, their costumes and such. They're all just, they're fully voiced, and virtually all of them are interesting in some way. I think having multiple characters that you can play as and level up independently adds so much to it as well, at least, in my opinion, for someone who enjoys that kind of thing. You can even use any combination of 4 characters to play as at any one time, and switching between them on the fly to create some, really cool elemental combos. The world design in both of the main areas named Mondstadt and Liyue are just so vibrant and inviting. They're really fun to explore, and because there's so much loot hidden around, you're always incentivized to look around. That's one of the main things. There's not really much to find in Breath of the Wild when you compare it to this game. The more stuff you find on your adventures, the more you can upgrade your characters. Simple as that. Plus, the combat is so fun and so engaging that it never feels like a chore, except perhaps for a few of the tougher enemies, which can really give you a headache sometimes. More importantly though, your weapons don't just explode after they've hit a few enemies, they don't just disintegrate into nothing, they are persistent and can be leveled up. Plus, they all have different abilities depending on which weapon you equip. You also have a constellation system, which gives permanent boosts to your characters, but they are honestly quite hard to get, which is something that I will touch on later, and I do think it's a negative. They just need to be easier to acquire, honestly. I think that would help. On top of that, there's an artifact system too. You can equip 5 artifacts per character, which each give a set bonus depending on how many of a certain set that you have equipped at one time. It's either 2 or 4, I believe. Each and every artifact can be individually leveled up as well, giving you even more customization, and they can all roll with different stats. Something that really sets it apart from Breath of the Wild in a big way is that it has a metric ton of quests to complete. Actual, quest markers and things to go and find and do. I don't really mind the way Breath of the Wild approaches quests, having it be a much more organic and discovery-based experience, I suppose. That's fine, but it's just not for me. I suppose the elephant in the room at this point though is the fact that Genshin Impact is a free-to-play game with gacha mechanics, which, it's not good. I'll be the first to admit it, actually. I'm actually against free-to-play games in general, or at least the predatory business practices that accompany them. I'm really against loot boxes and microtransactions and all that nonsense. I'm, from a time where games were made and sold and that was the end of it and you moved on to the next one, so I just don't like this nickel and diming aspect of the new games media, the games companies rather. I just don't like it. At this point in time, I think I've played Genshin Impact for hundreds of hours, and no word of a lie, I haven't missed a single day of play since the game released back in September 2020. I've played in every single event and I've done virtually everything in the game, and I haven't engaged with the gacha loot box stuff at all, except of course for, the free pulls that you get during the game and the events. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I'll tell you everything I've actually spent in the game. The only money I've spent in the game is for 3 consecutive, one after the other, battle passes since it released. And they were about £9 each, which I'm not sure what that is in America. Probably something like $13, $14. I'm not sure exactly. And the reason that I paid for them is because of the game they made and how fair they were with everything, considering the entire game, all events, all expansions, everything is free. You're not expected to pay for any of it. So I wanted to throw them a little bit of money to say that they did a job well done, quite frankly. That said, I actually have self-control and I'm able to say no to the loot boxes. I don't, put extra money in to try for extra characters. If I get the rare character, I get the rare character. If I don't get the character, then I don't care. I just use what I have, I have actually pulled some decent characters from the free pulls that I've got, so I'm quite happy with that. You only really get a few free ones, I would say, but as I said, if I don't get a certain character, then so be it, whatever, big deal. I don't really care about it enough to worry. I mean, some people are spending 700, 1,000, 1,500, trying to get these rare characters, and really, you don't need the characters to complete the game. You can just play it normally and you'll be fine with the characters that you're given. If you can try to keep that attitude and keep it in your mind not to go overboard, then you're probably in a good place. Plus, you can just not buy the battle pass, and play for hundreds of hours completely free if you want to, and that is possible. You don't need to spend you don't even need to spend what I spent in the game at all. You can just play it completely for free. Yes, it'll take a lot more time to get through stuff, but it's free, so what does it matter? Of course, on the flip side of that, Breath of the Wild is a full price game and rarely goes on sale, at least that I've seen, and really has nowhere near the content of Genshin Impact. Of course, Genshin Impact is a live service, which is always adding stuff, so perhaps it's a bit of an unfair comparison in that respect. But so many people like to compare these two games, so here we are. People were saying that it's a clone, so, let's talk about them, right? At the end of the day, the games are similar, and one of them definitely came before the other, so to speak. But I don't think it's a problem for games to take aspects from other games to add into their own to become great. I really don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, consider the Batman Arkham games. Their combat was put into the Lord of the Rings games, the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games. And there is that saying that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So essentially saying, if you're copying someone, you must be doing it because the thing they have is great. And I don't think it's a problem for you to transplant game mechanics from one game into another, because really everything in the human world is built on iteration, making things better. And I believe that is what Genshin did here. I believe Genshin took what Breath of the Wild did well and added or took away things that they thought worked or didn't work, and that's why I love it so much, because if people are saying they're essentially a clone, I mean, that can't be true, because I like one and don't like the other. So it is difficult because, again, it all comes down to who you are and what you like. I mean, we're all probably in agreement with that. I'm not trying to say that Breath of the Wild is a bad game. In fact, I will probably try Breath of the Wild 2 if it releases, considering it's somewhat of a myth at this point. People think it's coming, people think it's not coming, So I probably will give it a go, but at the end of the day, as I said, the games are similar, but enjoying one over the other isn't exactly a crime. And I think if you're a Breath of the Wild fan watching this video and you haven't tried Genshin, or you just dismissed it as a clone, I would honestly suggest, give it a try. You might actually like it. And considering that you think it's similar, why wouldn't you like it, It's completely free and won't cost you anything to get into. And if you like it, you can keep playing it for free, or if you don't like it, you can just drop it. So there you have it. That's why I prefer Genshin Impact to Breath of the Wild. Now, feel free to disagree, feel free to leave any sort of comments you want down below. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I would just like to say, if some of the audio feels a bit off in places, maybe volume of my recorded voice, it's because I'm still messing with my setup and trying to get the best sound out of everything. So if you hear any inconsistencies, I do apologize for that. But yeah, I'm still learning this YouTube thing. I'm still getting used to how to do stuff, and I'm trying to grow the channel. So if you want to help out, you can do so by leaving likes, engaging with the video, leaving comments. And of course, the best thing you can do is subscribe if you want to. I have an Instagram link in the description down below and some other links as well. Feel free to take a look at those if you want to. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time.